They kept saying it like it was settled. Elias is fine now. He forgave us. Elias never corrected them. He nodded when they said it, the way you nod at a stranger who's chosen the wrong seat and is already halfway comfortable. The house still smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. Sunday afternoon light stretched thin across the living room, touching the places that used to matter. Someone had moved the framed photos again. He noticed because they were crooked, not because of who was in them. "Sit," his sister Mara said, already arranging cups on the table. "You look tired." He sat. He always did. They talked over him at first. Weather, work, the neighbor's dog. Someone laughed too loudly at nothing. Elias watched Mara's hands as she poured tea. She used the same mug every time, the one with the crack down the side. He wondered when it would finally split. "You're really okay, right?" his mother asked, not looking at him. He waited a second too long before answering. "Yeah." That was all it took. The word passed through the room and settled. Shoulders loosened. Someone exhaled. Forgiveness, they believed, was something that arrived quietly and stayed. Elias lifted the cup. The tea burned his tongue. He didn't flinch. Before this house, before the careful conversations and lowered voices, there had been a phone call that never stopped ringing. He still felt it sometimes in his pocket, a vibration that wasn't there. He hadn't answered that night. He was driving, or tired, or already halfway into not wanting to know. By the time he pulled over, the screen was dark. They didn't talk about that part. Mara reached for the sugar, then paused. "Do you still take it sweet?" "I don't remember," he said. She smiled like it was a joke. "You always did." She spooned it in anyway. The sweetness bloomed too fast. It made his stomach tighten. Across the room, his father sat with his hands folded, eyes fixed on the television that wasn't on. He'd grown smaller somehow. Or maybe Elias had learned where to look. "We're just glad you're here," his mother said. "After everything." Everything was a word they used carefully. It meant the hospital, the meeting with the lawyer, the quiet agreement they made before anyone else could hear it. Elias nodded again. They thought forgiveness looked like this: a man who showed up, who didn't raise his voice, who stayed. At the grocery store later, someone from the old neighborhood recognized him near the produce aisle. "Elias," the woman said, surprise lifting her eyebrows. "I heard you moved back." "For now." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You're a good man. Not many people could do what you did. Let it go like that." He watched her choose apples. She pressed each one, checking for softness. "I didn't let it go," he said, but she was already walking away. At the checkout, the cashier asked if he wanted a bag. He said no. The apples knocked gently against each other in his arms, bruising where he couldn't see. They had practiced the story before telling it to anyone else. It was Mara's idea to keep it simple. The more details, the more questions. His mother agreed. His father didn't say anything, which meant yes. Elias sat at the kitchen table that night, listening to the house settle around them. He could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock ticking too loud. "He'll understand," Mara said, not looking at him. "You always do." That was the first time he realized they weren't asking. On Wednesday, Elias went back to the old repair shop. The sign was still there, paint peeling at the corners. Inside, the air smelled like oil and dust. The man behind the counter squinted. "Didn't expect to see you." "I was in the area." "You here to close it out?" the man asked. "Or just looking?" Elias ran his hand along the counter. The wood was scratched, familiar. "Just looking." In the back, a radio played softly, a song he used to hate. He stood there longer than necessary, staring at the empty space where the third lift had been. "You did the right thing," the man said suddenly. "Family's family." Elias smiled. It felt like pulling a muscle. That night, Mara knocked on his door without waiting for an answer. She sat on the edge of the bed like she used to when they were kids. "You okay?" she asked. He watched the light from the hallway fall across her face. She looked older when she was quiet. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked. She frowned. "About what?" He shook his head. "Nothing." She reached out, squeezed his hand once. "We're lucky to have you." Lucky was another word they used carefully. The twist came in a small way, the way most things do. Not with shouting or confession, but with a folder Elias found while looking for an extra blanket. It was tucked behind old tax papers, edges worn. Inside were copies of forms, signatures at the bottom. His signature. He sat on the floor, back against the bed, and turned each page slowly. Dates lined up. Times he remembered being tired, trusting. He understood then why they'd been so gentle with him, why forgiveness had been assumed, not requested. They hadn't needed it. They had already taken what they needed. At dinner the next night, his father poured wine for everyone but him. "You driving?" Mara asked. "Just didn't want any," Elias said. They ate quietly. Forks scraped plates. His mother talked about a recipe she wanted to try. "Elias," his father said suddenly, "we know this wasn't easy for you." Elias looked up. "But it's done now," his father continued. "We can move on." Something shifted then, not loudly, like a shelf giving way in another room. Elias set his fork down. "You ever wonder," he said, "what moving on looks like to the person who stays quiet?" No one answered. Mara reached for his hand. He let her. Later, alone, Elias stood in the backyard. The grass was uneven, patches worn thin. He remembered fixing the fence years ago, boards lined up neatly. A car passed on the street. Somewhere, someone laughed. He thought about the call he hadn't answered, about the forms he had signed without reading, about how easy it was to be called forgiving when no one had heard you say yes. On his last morning, his mother packed him food for the drive. "You don't have to rush off," she said. "I know." She hugged him, holding on a second longer than usual. "We're proud of you." He nodded into her shoulder. Mara walked him to the car. "Call when you get there." "Yeah." She hesitated. "You really are okay, right?" Elias opened the door, then paused. The road stretched out ahead of him, familiar and not. "I'm still here," he said. She smiled, relieved. "That's all I meant." He drove away without looking back. By the time the house disappeared in the mirror, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it.